If you are a private landowner with property in areas that have endangered or threatened species, you might be concerned about how that can impact operations on your land. There's a voluntary program that can help reduce uncertainty and provide landowners with protection.
A safe harbor agreement is a voluntary program designed to do good conservation work for an endangered species, while at the same time facilitating working lands and continued operations. A safe harbor agreement is typically made between a landowner and the Fish and Wildlife Service, or in the case of a programmatic agreement, can be held by a third party like Texas Parks and Wildlife, and then engage landowners. That process makes it much easier for landowners to enroll as far as paperwork goes and so on. It's much more efficient. So that could encompass a number of different measures. Often these will be things that will better the habitat for those particular species, or perhaps better the populations of those species.
There are 3 benefits for landowners: protection from liability if a species is harmed, assurances of normal operations, and participation is voluntary and non-permanent.
And what that means is that if you are conducting normal operations that are covered activities under the agreement, such as farming or ranching, and you were to accidentally kill one of these endangered species, you're covered, you're protected. Another thing that's a benefit to landowners is assurances. So once you enter into a safe harbor agreement, there will be a set of covered activities as well as a set of conservation measures that are part of that agreement. And at that point, those are the expectations for the duration of the agreement. There will be no request for additional resources or land during the term of that agreement, so you have some assurances as far as what processes will take place and a landowner can choose to engage in. So the Texas kangaroo rat is what's considered to be a candidate species right now. So it has been proposed for listing, but has not yet been listed. But because it has this status of candidate, we can have what we call a CCAA, or a Candidate Conservation Agreement with Assurances. And so we have one of these programmatic agreements for the Texas kangaroo rat, which essentially allows us to enroll landowners to do good conservation actions for the rat and then be covered for particular activities that they continue to do under their working lands and their operations. So a conservation benefit agreement is the new name for a safe harbor agreement and a candidate conservation agreement with assurances.
Previously, no new enrollment could occur under a candidate conservation agreement with assurances once the species was listed. Although landowners already enrolled in the program could continue receiving benefits, the only way a newly interested landowner could participate was through the development of a new safe harbor agreement for the same species. All current safe harbor agreements and candidate conservation agreements with assurances will remain in place. But going forward, all new agreements will become conservation benefit agreements.
The new conservation benefit agreement streamlines this process by which a species that can be a candidate or an endangered species and landowners can work under this type of agreement. So any agreement, whether it be a CCAA, SHA, or this new CBA, will come with a set of conservation practices or conservation measures. And those will generally be specific to the species that is being covered, as well as specific to that particular property and specific to discussions with that particular landowner. So for example, there could be, let's just say, 8 different conservation measures that could be enacted for any particular species. And in discussion with the landowner, they may say, here's 4 that we can reasonably do on this property, and then here's the covered activities that we would like to also see as part of that agreement. And then we would discuss that with them, put those into the agreement, and move on from there. So one of the important things to know about any of these agreements is that they are all voluntary. So this is something that a landowner would choose to enter into an agreement with Texas Parks and Wildlife or with Fish and Wildlife Service. It's not forced by any one of those parties. And it's also voluntary such that if they decide a few years down the road that they don't choose to stay within the agreement, they can do so. And one of the advantages of this type of agreement is that it doesn't permanently change anything about the property. So there'll be no change in value, in restrictions on the property as a result of this agreement because it is voluntary and it is for a term.
For more information, see the video description below.